Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, some preamble that I really should go without saying. There is no disagreement in any corner of the House about the values that should be underlying this legislation. We all value a safe Canada where every single human is free to live their lives as their fullest selves, irrespective of their race, religion, ethnicity, language, physical or mental disability, etc. There is no member in this House who wants to see hate or the symbols of hate that the present legislation deals with displayed or promoted in any way, in our country or in any other country. I think we remain unanimous in the House in condemning hate, hate crimes, and hate propaganda. A careful distinction must be brought to bear between condemnation and criminalization, and we must always note this. When we approach discussions of criminalization, it should be with humility. If I could wave a magic wand and stop anyone in this country from ever propagating any hate or committing a hate crime, I swear I would do it. But such magic is not one of the powers invested in us as elected representatives. We can only modify the criminal justice system, and we must be alive to the unintended consequences that such modifications could make. In that spirit, I would honestly like to raise with the members opposite the following concerns I have with this legislation. Number one, will it drive hate organizations underground? It is said that sunlight is the best disinfectant. When the Justice Minister introduced this legislation, my thoughts immediately turned to the famous and thankfully aborted Nazi rally in Skokie, Illinois of 1977. It's a very famous case, Mr. Speaker, in part because the ACL lawyer who fought for that march, for the right of those marchers to march, was David Goldberger, who was a very proud Jew. Reprehensibly, the marchers chose Skokie, Illinois because there was a high proportion of Holocaust survivors there that they sought to terrify. On the day of that march, 20 broken and twisted individuals wearing Nazi Hakenkreuzes were met by 2,000 counter-protesters shouting them down. No violence occurred, and the cowardly, traitorous Nazis went home without marching. A recent ABC News article quotes the current mayor of Skokie, Illinois, saying that looking back 40 years later, many positive things came out of that day. Previously, the Holocaust survivors in Skokie, Illinois, he says, were a very quiet group who did not talk about their experiences. But he says that these events ignited a passion in them, and they founded the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center within 2 years of that day. And the ABC News article notes that both Bill Clinton and Barack Obama have recognized the incredible work that that museum does. In many ways, Mr. Speaker, John Stuart Mill can be thought of as the founder of the liberal tradition that gives the Liberal Party its name. This is what he had to say about false and hateful opinions. Though the silenced opinion may be an error, it is only by the collision of adverse opinions that the remainder of the truth has any chance of being supplied. Which is to say, Mr. Speaker, no one wants to hear from hateful miscreants. No one in this House does. But when we do, we must take it as a solemn opportunity to not only perhaps not change their mind, but loudly and with facts and arguments disabuse whatever listeners they may have of the poison they utter. So with the words of John Stuart Mill and the examples of the Skokie counter-protesters in mind, I asked the Justice Minister this admittedly counterintuitive question. By driving hate into the fetid swamps of Discord or whatever website has replaced 4chan, does it deprive our communities the opportunity to denounce them in person, to show them in the real world that their views are not welcome, their movement has no purchase among the 99.9% of Canadians who value each other's fundamental rights and freedoms? And as a sub-concern, if it is allowed to fester in these dark corners of the internet, when it does finally burst out, is it more likely to do so in a form worse than a flag or a symbol? I do not ask this question lightly, Mr. Speaker. And it brings me to my second concern with the proposed legislation. In some comments I made following a speech about criminal justice, I expressed concern that the Deputy Government House leaders seem more concerned with abstractions rather than concrete occurrences. And on this side of the House, we pride ourselves in concerning ourselves with concrete occurrences. As a Canadian, I am terribly upset, disgusted, disappointed that Jewish individuals have been harmed because of who they are by criminal psychopaths. A man was beaten up in front of his children in Montreal this summer. A few weeks ago, a woman was stabbed in the kosher food section of a local Ottawa grocery store. Less well known, in spring 2024, a 15-year-old Israeli immigrant to Canada was attacked at school for her place of origin. In that case, I believe it took 2 weeks before the police even deigned to lay charges. In my own circle of physician friends, I am sorry and ashamed to report that some Jews have left Canada permanently because of the lack of safety these concrete events demonstrate. I want dearly for my Jewish friends to feel safe to return to Canada. Year after year, we have seen increases in violent crime in Canada. we have seen ongoing increases in every classification, every sort of violent crime. These increases, I'm sorry to say, started in 2015. In every class of violent crime, we have seen a failure of the Liberal government to keep the bad guys in jail. It is my understanding that the willful promotion of hatred, whether with a symbol or a flag or a speech or a newspaper article, is already illegal in Canada under Section 319(2) of the Criminal Code. It is furthermore my understanding that intimidating a person who seeks to enter a place of worship or any other place actually is already illegal under Section 423 of the Criminal Code. Yet, Mr. Speaker, we've seen so many infractions of these already existing laws in a way that targets religious minorities. In fact, I may go so far as to say that every religious minority is dealing with more and more infractions of these laws in just about every Canadian city. In fact, every Canadian is dealing with more and more of every sort of crime. And this is why I fear that the present bill is an abstraction and a distraction. We need concrete measures. We need the violent and hateful people who do these sorts of things, who break our laws, to go to jail and stay in jail. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives have proposed such measures to put the bad guys in jail. I earnestly beg the members opposite to take us up on it. Let's do these concrete things. So those are my twin concerns. By removing the provincial Attorney General consent and watering down the definition of hate, do they cast a wider net, driving cranks and loons underground where they might become more hateful and, God forbid, violent? And why do they cast a wider net when they're already refusing to use the smaller, more targeted net that they do have? Why do they refuse to repeal their irresponsible bail laws that let violent psychos back on our street again and again? I ask the questions in good faith. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I guess the question I would have for the member is, when we talk about hate speech and the issues that are related to it, the violence, you have to take into consideration that as a federal government, we want to bring forward changes to the criminal law that will actually have a tangible impact. It will give additional tools, and I would emphasize this, additional tools for law enforcement officers, provincially appointed Crown attorneys that take these individuals to the court system. It gives them that extra tool so that we can see more success in the prosecution and having heavier penalties for the individuals committing these hideous hate crimes against people. Would he not agree? It's shared responsibilities, and part of our responsibility is to pass.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
Thank you to the Honourable Member for the question. Yes, that's exactly what I'm driving at. We want concrete measures to enforce the laws that already exist. When I was listening to his question, I had to wonder, is it his belief that provincial attorney generals are the thing that's stopping violent criminals from going to jail right now? I don't think it is, and I don't think he would dare mention a provincial attorney general who he thinks is derelict in duty that way.
Questions and comments. Question et commentaire. The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for his excellent speech. He talked about the problems of enforcement. The government is trying to suggest that there's a problem in terms of lack of things being offences, but actually there's a problem of the government of not effective enforcement. But there's also a problem of the tone that's been set by this government when it comes to attacks, particularly against churches. We had Jerry Butts, the former advisor to the previous Prime Minister, who was intimately involved with the current Prime Minister's work as well, who basically said that these attacks on churches were understandable, a grotesque statement from a senior Liberal. So I wonder if my honourable friend would agree that we need to address the enforcement issue, but we also need to address the fact that senior people in this government have said things that have kind of tacitly lent credence to the motivations that may be behind some of these attacks.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
I agree with the member. I thank him for the point. Hate cannot be tolerated no matter what justification is given by the former Prime Minister's former Principal Secretary. I hope that we all keep that in mind as we approach commentary around the present legislation. I myself was distressed when the Conservative Justice Shadow Critic brought up this problem of church burnings, that he was met with laughter from the other side, and I did think that was inappropriate. So thank you for raising the point.
Question et commentaire. L'honorable député de Repentigny.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask a simple question and get a simple answer. There is currently an exception in the criminal code, the religious exemption. Does my colleague agree with that exemption?
Kitchener South Hespeler.
Thank you for the question. I fear it is not a simple question, and it goes to the heart of what I was talking about in the John Stuart Mill quote and philosophical liberalism. What one person means when they say something from a different culture or a different religion can be taken differently, and that's why we have to have a bias towards philosophical liberalism that I fear the government is abandoning with the present legislation. Thank you.